What happens when prejudice collides with resilience and dignity? A decorated black veteran, denied entry to a luxury hotel by a racist manager, refuses to let humiliation define his story. What unfolds next is a tale of courage, accountability, and a billionaire's unexpected intervention that changes everything. The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the bustling city streets as James Turner wheeled himself down the smooth sidewalk toward the grand Silver Oak Hotel. A proud black veteran, James carried the weight of his service not just in his heart, but in his body, his wheelchair a silent testament to the sacrifices he had made. Despite his injuries, James exuded dignity, his blazer adorned with service medals glinting in the sunlight. He had come to the city for a family reunion, and the Silver Oak Hotel was the venue, a luxurious establishment known for its elegance and impeccable service. As James approached the entrance, he noticed the doorman hesitate before pulling the heavy glass door open. Inside, the lobby was a display of opulence. Chandeliers sparkling overhead, marble floors gleaming, and plush furniture scattered elegantly. James moved toward the check-in desk, his hands steady on the wheels of his chair. Behind the counter stood Mark Davis, the hotel manager, a man in his early 40s with a sharp suit and a sharper tongue. Mark glanced at James, his practiced smile faltering for a fraction of a second before it returned, now strained. "Good afternoon," James greeted, his voice warm but professional. Mark's eyes flicked to the wheelchair, then back to James's face. "Afternoon," he replied curtly. "Can I help you?" "Yes," James began, pulling out his reservation details. "I have a booking for this weekend for the family reunion event." Mark scanned the document with a raised eyebrow. "I'm sorry, but it seems we're fully booked. There must have been a mistake." His tone was cold, dismissive. James frowned, his instincts telling him something was off. "That can't be right," he said calmly. "The reservation was confirmed weeks ago. Maybe you could check again?" Mark stiffened. "I said we're fully booked," he repeated, his voice louder now. He leaned over the counter, his gaze narrowing. "And frankly, sir, I don't think this hotel is suited for someone in your position." The words hit like a slap. James inhaled sharply, steadying himself. "My position?" he asked, his voice still calm but with an edge. Mark smirked. "Look, I'm just saying this hotel is more suited to guests who, well, fit its image. There's a motel down the street. Maybe they'd be able to accommodate you." The nearby receptionist froze mid-typing, her face paling. A few guests milling around the lobby exchanged uneasy glances, their discomfort evident. One woman quickly turned away, pretending not to hear the exchange. James's jaw tightened, but he didn't raise his voice. "I served this country for over 20 years, he said, his tone steady but firm. "And now you're telling me I don't fit the image of your hotel?" Mark shrugged, clearly unbothered. "I don't make the rules, sir. I enforce them." The humiliation was palpable, but James refused to let it break him. Straightening his posture, he nodded once and said, "Thank you for your time." Then, with the same dignity he had walked into countless battles with, he turned and wheeled himself toward the exit. Outside, James paused on the sidewalk, the sting of Mark's words sinking in. A young woman in a cafe uniform, Sophia Morales, had been standing near the entrance and had witnessed the exchange. Her dark eyes filled with anger and sympathy as she stepped toward him. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "What just happened in there? It wasn't right." James offered her a small, tired smile. "It's not the first time," he said quietly. "But thank you." Sophia hesitated, then made a decision. "You shouldn't let him get away with this," she said. "People need to know." James didn't respond, but Sophia was already pulling out her phone, her hands trembling slightly. As she began typing, James wheeled away, determined to focus on the reunion ahead. He wasn't about to let one man's ignorance ruin his weekend or his pride. Sophia Morales couldn't shake the image of James Turner leaving the Silver Oak Hotel, his back straight, his expression stoic, despite the humiliation he had just endured. She had seen enough to know that this wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a reflection of everything wrong with how some people wielded power. As a receptionist at the Silver Oak Hotel, Sophia had worked under Mark Davis for 2 years. She had witnessed his dismissive attitude toward people he deemed unworthy of the hotel's prestigious image. It was always subtle enough to avoid official complaints, but blatant enough to make employees like Sophia uncomfortable. But this time was different. Watching a veteran, someone who had sacrificed so much for the country, be dismissed so callously was the final straw. Sophia took a deep breath, pulled out her phone, and typed up a post for social media. Her caption read, "Today, I witnessed a decorated veteran in a wheelchair being denied entry to the Silver Oak Hotel by our manager, who claimed he didn't fit the hotel's image. This isn't right. A man who fought for our freedom deserves better." Sophia attached a photo she had discreetly taken of James outside the hotel, his medals gleaming in the sunlight. She hesitated for a moment before hitting post, wondering if it would jeopardize her job, but her sense of justice overpowered her fear. The post quickly began to gain traction. Within hours, it had been shared hundreds of times, with comments flooding in from people expressing outrage at James's treatment. Veterans, activists, and everyday citizens voiced their support, sharing their own stories of discrimination and tagging news outlets to amplify Sophia's post. That evening, James sat in his modest hotel room, trying to push the day's events out of his mind. He had found another place to stay, a smaller, less glamorous inn run by a kind older couple who had welcomed him with open arms. As he scrolled through his phone, he noticed a flurry of notifications. Curious, he opened a message from an old friend who had sent him a link. Clicking it, James's eyes widened as he read Sophia's post and saw the photo of himself outside the Silver Oak Hotel. The comments were filled with words of support and outrage. One read, "This is unacceptable. No veteran should ever be treated this way. Thank you for your service, James Turner." Another said, "Mark Davis should be fired immediately. This is disgraceful." James's initial reaction was one of embarrassment. He had never sought attention for his service, and the idea of becoming a viral story made him uneasy. But as he read the comments, he realized this wasn't just about him. It was about every person who had been dismissed, humiliated, or underestimated because of prejudice. Sophia, meanwhile, was overwhelmed by the response to her post. Messages poured into her inbox from people thanking her for speaking out and encouraging her to stand strong. Among those who saw the post was Ethan Morgan, a billionaire philanthropist with a deep respect for veterans. Known for his charitable work and commitment to justice, Ethan was deeply moved by James's story. He made a decision that night. He would not let this injustice go unanswered. By the following morning, Sophia's post had exploded across social media. It had been shared thousands of times, with hashtags like "Respect Our Veterans," "Silver Oak Scandal," and "Justice for James" trending on multiple platforms. People from all walks of life expressed their anger at the treatment James Turner had endured and their admiration for his dignity in the face of such blatant discrimination. News outlets picked up the story almost immediately. Local stations ran headlines like, "Black Veteran Denied Hotel Entry by Manager, Social Media Demands Accountability." The story soon made its way to national platforms, sparking debates about systemic prejudice and the lack of respect for those who served their country. James, still in his modest hotel room, was stunned as he watched the story unfold. His phone buzzed non-stop with calls and messages, some from strangers offering their support and others from media outlets requesting interviews. James hesitated. He was a private man who had spent his life serving others without seeking recognition. But he also understood the importance of this moment. "I never wanted to become the face of anything," he told himself, his voice quiet yet firm. "But maybe it's time I speak up. Not for me, but for everyone who's ever been treated this way." Meanwhile, the Silver Oak Hotel faced an avalanche of backlash. Their social media pages were flooded with negative reviews and comments condemning their treatment of James. "Disgusting behavior," one user wrote. "How can a luxury hotel justify turning away a veteran in a wheelchair? Boycott this place." The corporate office of Silver Oak Hotels scrambled to respond, issuing a vague statement. "We are aware of the incident at our Dallas location and are conducting an internal investigation. We value inclusivity and respect for all guests." The statement did little to quell the outrage. People demanded accountability, calling for the immediate termination of Mark Davis. His actions had not only tarnished the hotel's reputation, but had also highlighted deeper issues within its culture. At the heart of the uproar was billionaire philanthropist Ethan Morgan. Known for his outspoken stance on social justice and veteran support, Ethan had come across Sophia's post the night before. Deeply moved, he reached out to Sophia directly, commending her courage for speaking up and asking for James's contact information. Sophia, initially overwhelmed by the attention her post had garnered, was relieved to hear from someone with influence and a clear sense of purpose. "I just want to help make this right," Ethan assured her. Within hours, Ethan connected with James. Their first conversation was brief but heartfelt. "Mr. Turner," Ethan began, "what happened to you is unacceptable. As someone who admires the sacrifices veterans make, I can't stand by and watch this go unanswered. Let me help." James, ever humble, responded, "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Morgan, but I didn't share my story to cause trouble. I just want people to be treated with the respect they deserve." "That's exactly why this matters," Ethan replied. "Your story has the power to create change, and I'd be honored to stand beside you in making that happen." Ethan wasted no time formulating a plan. He announced publicly that he would not only support James, but also work to ensure that no veteran or anyone would have to endure such treatment again. His tweet read, "James Turner is a hero who deserves our respect, not humiliation. I'm stepping in to ensure justice is served. The Silver Oak Hotel has a lot to answer for." The tweet quickly gained traction, with thousands of likes and retweets. Ethan's involvement added fuel to the fire, putting even more pressure on the hotel chain to act. Meanwhile, Mark Davis, the manager at the center of the scandal, found himself in hot water. Guests canceled reservations, employees began speaking out about his history of discriminatory behavior, and the corporate office couldn't ignore the growing storm. Back at the modest inn where James was staying, he prepared himself for what came next. With Ethan's support and the public rallying behind him, James knew this was no longer just about him. It was about fighting for a world where dignity and respect weren't optional, but expected. Ethan Morgan, a 72-year-old billionaire philanthropist with salt and pepper hair and an aura of quiet authority, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his New York City office. He gazed out at the skyline, the viral story of James Turner still fresh in his mind. Known for his unwavering commitment to social justice, Ethan had spent decades using his wealth to fight inequality, and this situation struck a deep personal chord. Ethan had a soft spot for veterans. His father had served in World War II, instilling in him a lifelong respect for those who sacrificed for their country. The idea of a decorated veteran being turned away from a hotel, humiliated no less, ignited a fire in Ethan's heart. "James deserves better," Ethan murmured to himself, pacing the room. He adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses and grabbed his phone to make the first of many calls. Ethan's assistant arranged a call with James, who was initially hesitant about speaking to a billionaire. But Ethan's warm and down-to-earth tone quickly put him at ease. "Mr. Turner," Ethan began, his voice calm but resolute, "I've read about what happened to you, and let me start by saying this. I'm sorry. You've given so much for this country, and what you experienced is beyond unacceptable." "Thank you, Mr. Morgan," James replied, his tone humble. "But I'm not looking for pity. I just want to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. That's exactly why I'm calling, Ethan said, his voice growing more determined. I don't just want to fix this. I want to change the system that allowed it to happen. And I need your help to do it. Within hours, Ethan released a public statement. James Turner is a hero, and his story has moved me deeply. I am personally stepping in to ensure justice is served. I'll be visiting the Silver Oak Hotel in Dallas with Mr. Turner to address this issue head-on. The announcement sent shockwaves through social media and the news cycle. Ethan's involvement elevated the story to a national conversation, with prominent figures expressing support for James and calling for systemic change. Ethan didn't stop there. During a press conference later that day, he revealed his decision to acquire a controlling stake in the Silver Oak Hotel chain. When leadership fails to uphold basic decency, it's time to bring in new leadership, he declared. We're going to make Silver Oak a symbol of inclusivity and respect. Back in Dallas, Mark Davis was scrambling. The news of Ethan Morgan's involvement sent him into a panic. He had expected the story to blow over, not to spiral into a full-blown scandal. Desperate to save face, Mark tried to downplay the incident, claiming it was a misunderstanding. But the damage was done. Former employees came forward, sharing stories of Mark's discriminatory behavior, and guests began canceling their reservations. Corporate executives, under immense pressure, announced that Mark would be placed on indefinite leave pending an investigation. A few days later, Ethan flew to Dallas in his private jet, accompanied by James. As they arrived at the Silver Oak Hotel, a crowd of supporters and reporters gathered outside. James, initially overwhelmed by the attention, straightened his posture and wheeled forward with quiet dignity. Ethan stepped to the microphone first. "This man," he said, gesturing toward James, "deserves our respect and gratitude, not humiliation. What happened here is a stain on this establishment, but it's also an opportunity for change." The crowd erupted into applause. James followed with a short but heartfelt statement. "I didn't want to be a symbol or a story, but if sharing my experience can make life better for someone else, then it's worth it." Inside the hotel, Ethan and James met with the regional director, who formally apologized to James on behalf of the chain. Mark Davis, now visibly nervous, was brought into the meeting. Ethan didn't waste words. "Mark," he said, his voice firm but calm, "your actions reflect poorly not just on yourself, but on this entire organization. This is a place meant to welcome people from all walks of life. You failed to uphold that standard." Mark stammered an apology, but it was clear that his words carried little weight. Ethan concluded, "You're no longer a part of this organization. It's time for leadership that represents fairness and respect." As Mark left the room, his head hung low, Ethan turned to James. "This isn't just about one hotel or one incident," Ethan said. "It's about setting an example. And with your help, that's exactly what we'll do." The Silver Oak Hotel lobby was abuzz with activity as James Turner and Ethan Morgan entered through the grand glass doors. The air inside was heavy with anticipation, the gathered crowd of reporters and onlookers buzzing with whispers. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment as James, in his wheelchair, moved forward with his medals glinting under the chandelier lights. At his side, Ethan, with his distinguished gray hair and confident stride, exuded an aura of authority that commanded the room. Staff members watched nervously from behind the counter, their gazes flickering toward the man who had been the root of the controversy. Mark Davis. Mark stood near the reception desk, his face pale and tense, visibly shaken by the unfolding events. For years he had ruled the hotel staff with an iron fist, his thinly veiled biases going unchecked. Now he was facing the consequences of his actions in front of a live audience. Ethan approached the middle of the lobby, his steps deliberate, and stopped a few feet away from Mark. The room fell silent as he turned toward the manager, his sharp blue eyes locking onto Mark's trembling form. James positioned himself beside Ethan, his calm yet unwavering presence adding to the weight of the moment. "Mark Davis," Ethan began, his voice carrying across the room with a calm yet cutting edge. "Your actions reflect everything this establishment should not stand for. This is a hotel meant to provide comfort and dignity to every guest, regardless of who they are or where they come from. And yet, under your management, a decorated veteran, a man who served this country with honor, was humiliated and turned away." Mark opened his mouth to respond, but Ethan raised a hand, silencing him. "I'm not here for excuses," Ethan continued. "I'm here for accountability." The gathered crowd watched intently as Ethan stepped closer, his tone firm but measured. "Do you have any idea what it means to serve others? To put your life on the line for people you've never met? That's what James Turner did. And instead of honoring his sacrifice, you disrespected him. You dismissed him as if he were less than human." Mark shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting to the cameras. "I didn't mean any harm," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't realize—" "You didn't realize?" Ethan interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "Or you didn't care?" He let the question hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "This isn't the first time your behavior has been called into question. Former employees and guests have come forward with similar stories. The pattern is clear." James, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was steady, carrying the quiet authority of someone who had faced far greater challenges. "Mark," he said, addressing the manager directly, "this isn't about me. It's about every person who's ever been judged unfairly. I came here expecting nothing but a fair chance to be treated like anyone else. And instead I was met with disdain." Mark's face flushed, his gaze dropping to the floor. The weight of the situation was palpable, and the silence that followed James's words was deafening. Ethan took a step back, addressing the entire room. "Let this be a turning point," he declared. "This isn't just about correcting one person's behavior. It's about changing the culture that allows this kind of discrimination to persist. Effective immediately, Mark Davis is no longer employed by Silver Oak Hotels." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mixture of relief and approval. Ethan turned toward James, placing a hand on his shoulder. "James, you deserve better. And I promise you, this hotel, and every Silver Oak property, will do better." As the press captured every moment, Ethan announced new initiatives for the hotel chain, including mandatory diversity training, accessibility improvements, and partnerships with veteran organizations. The crowd erupted into applause, their faith in justice restored. Mark, meanwhile, was escorted out of the building, his once confident demeanor replaced by the humbled steps of a man forced to confront his actions. The moment wasn't just a victory for James. It was a triumph for accountability and change. With Mark Davis no longer at the helm of the Silver Oak Hotel in Dallas, Ethan Morgan wasted no time initiating a complete overhaul of the chain's policies. For Ethan, this was more than damage control. It was an opportunity to set a new standard for inclusivity, respect, and accountability in the hospitality industry. The first step was an all-hands meeting with the hotel's staff. The employees, many of whom had silently endured Mark's behavior for years, gathered in the same grand lobby where the confrontation had taken place. This time, the atmosphere was different. Instead of tension and fear, there was a sense of anticipation, a belief that change was finally on the horizon. Ethan, standing beside James Turner, addressed the staff directly. "What happened here was unacceptable," he began. "But moments like these can be turning points. Together, we're going to build a hotel chain that doesn't just meet expectations. It sets the standard for how every guest, employee, and visitor should be treated." He outlined a series of immediate changes: mandatory diversity and inclusion training, All staff members, from front desk clerks to upper management, would participate in workshops designed to address unconscious bias and foster a culture of respect. Accessibility. Upgrades. Ethan announced a multi-million-dollar initiative to make every Silver Oak property fully accessible for people with disabilities. No guest should ever feel unwelcome because of their needs, he said firmly. Veteran support programs. Ethan unveiled plans to partner with veteran organizations to provide employment opportunities, discounted stays, and mentorship programs for those who had served the country. The staff responded with a standing ovation, many visibly emotional as they realized that Ethan wasn't just making promises, he was committed to action. Ethan's changes extended beyond policy. He invited James to take on an advisory role within the company, ensuring that the voices of those who had experienced discrimination firsthand were heard. "I want you to be part of this journey, James," Ethan said during a private meeting. "Your perspective and resilience are invaluable. Help me make this chain a place where everyone feels welcome." James, initially hesitant, agreed. "If my experience can help prevent someone else from going through the same thing, then I'm in," he said. In his new role, James began working closely with the design and management teams to improve accessibility features. From wider doorways and ramps to intuitive room layouts, James's input transformed Silver Oak properties into some of the most inclusive spaces in the industry. Not everyone welcomed the changes. A small group of employees resisted the new policies, grumbling about unnecessary changes and catering to outsiders. Some guests, too, expressed skepticism, questioning the sudden shift in the hotel's approach. Ethan and James addressed these concerns head-on. Ethan held town hall-style meetings with staff and community members, listening to feedback and emphasizing the importance of the changes. "This isn't about politics or optics," he said during one meeting. "It's about doing what's right, and if anyone has an issue with that, this might not be the right place for them." James, too, played a crucial role in bridging the gap. During staff workshops, he shared his story, not to garner sympathy, but to foster understanding. His calm demeanor and willingness to engage in tough conversations gradually won over even the most skeptical employees. Sophia Morales, the courageous receptionist who had exposed Mark's actions, was another key figure in the transformation. Ethan recognized her bravery and offered her a promotion to the hotel's management team. "You were the spark that ignited this change," Ethan told her. "We need leaders like you who aren't afraid to stand up for what's right." Sophia accepted the role with pride, determined to honor the trust Ethan and James had placed in her. She became a champion of the new initiatives, ensuring that every guest and employee felt valued and respected. As news of the changes spread, public perception of the Silver Oak Hotel chain shifted dramatically. Once a symbol of exclusivity marred by scandal, it became a beacon of progress and inclusivity. Guests who had boycotted the chain began booking rooms again, inspired by the visible changes and the leadership of people like Ethan and James. The media praised the hotel's turnaround, with one article stating, "The Silver Oak Hotel chain isn't just fixing its image, it's setting an example for the entire industry." Months later, during a grand reopening event for the Dallas location, Ethan and James stood side by side in the beautifully renovated lobby. The changes were evident, not just in the physical accessibility upgrades, but in the warmth and professionalism of the staff. James addressed the crowd, his voice steady and filled with conviction. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with taking the first step. This hotel is proof that with the right leadership and a commitment to doing what's right, we can create spaces where everyone feels they belong. The applause that followed wasn't just for the words. It was for the journey that had brought them to that moment. The weekend of the family reunion arrived, and the Silver Oak Hotel in Dallas looked transformed, both inside and out. The grand lobby now featured wider pathways and accessible counters. subtle yet powerful reminders of the hotel's new commitment to inclusivity. Warm smiles from the staff greeted every guest, and the air buzzed with energy as families arrived, their laughter echoing against the marble floors. James Turner wheeled himself through the entrance, his head held high and his heart full of pride. For the first time in a long while, he felt completely at ease. His family was already gathered in the event hall, a spacious, beautifully decorated room filled with tables adorned with crisp linens and bouquets of fresh flowers. The space reflected more than luxury. It reflected respect, a stark contrast to the cold reception James had initially received. As James entered the hall, the room erupted in cheers and applause. His nieces and nephews ran up to greet him, their joy infectious. His sister, Ella, embraced him warmly, whispering, "You've always been our hero, but now the world sees it too." The reunion was everything James had hoped for and more. Relatives shared stories, played games, and enjoyed a delicious meal prepared by the hotel's kitchen staff. For James, the highlight was seeing his family gathered together, celebrating not just their bonds, but the resilience and progress that had emerged from adversity. Toward the end of the evening, Ethan Morgan made a surprise appearance, accompanied by Sophia Morales. As Ethan took the microphone, the room quieted. "I'm honored to be here tonight," he began, his voice steady and sincere. "James Turner has shown us all the true meaning of dignity, courage, and perseverance. It's because of him that this hotel, and our entire chain, has changed for the better." Ethan motioned for James to join him at the front. James hesitated briefly, then wheeled himself forward, greeted by a standing ovation from his family. Taking the microphone, he looked out at the room filled with his loved ones and said, "This weekend is about family, love, and support. It's about standing together and making the world a better place, one step or one wheel at a time." His words were met with resounding applause, and as James returned to his seat, his heart swelled with gratitude. The journey that had begun with humiliation had ended in triumph, not just for him, but for everyone who believed in justice and respect. That night, as the family reunion wound down and James shared quiet moments with his siblings, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The challenges he had faced had not only brought his family closer together, but had also created ripples of change far beyond the hotel's walls. The impact of James Turner's story went far beyond the walls of the Silver Oak Hotel. The changes sparked by his experience began to ripple through the community and beyond, touching the lives of countless individuals and reshaping attitudes toward inclusivity, respect, and justice. News outlets continued to follow the story, highlighting the transformation of the Silver Oak Hotel chain under Ethan Morgan's leadership. The viral post by Sophia Morales remained a symbol of how speaking out could create meaningful change. Local organizations began reaching out to both James and Ethan, inviting them to speak at events about their journey and the lessons learned. Community leaders praised the hotel's initiatives, particularly its partnerships with veteran organizations. These programs not only created employment opportunities, but also provided a platform for veterans to share their experiences and mentor others. The hotel became a hub for conversations about accessibility, with workshops and events held regularly in its renovated spaces. James, though initially reluctant to step into the spotlight, embraced his role as a quiet advocate for change. He attended community forums, sharing his story to inspire others to stand up against prejudice and speak out for justice. "It's not about one moment," he often said. "It's about creating a culture where respect is the default, not the exception." Sophia Morales, too, became a beacon of hope. Her courage to speak out against injustice earned her the admiration of many, and she used her new position in hotel management to implement further positive changes. "We all have a voice," she said during an interview. "It's up to us to use it when it matters most." The story also had a profound effect on Silver Oak's employees. Many who had felt disempowered under Mark Davis's management were now emboldened to share their ideas and concerns. The once intimidating workplace became a space of collaboration and support, where employees felt valued and respected. One of the most notable ripple effects came in the form of public dialogue. Social media users, inspired by James's story, began sharing their own experiences with discrimination and bias. Hashtags like #Justice for James and #Respect. Matters trended for weeks, sparking widespread conversations about the need for systemic change. Other businesses took note as well. Competing hotel chains and corporations began reevaluating their policies, implementing diversity and inclusion training, and prioritizing accessibility. The message was clear. Discrimination would not be tolerated, and those who failed to adapt risked facing the same public backlash that had initially engulfed the Silver Oak Hotel. For James, the most rewarding part of the journey was seeing the change it inspired in others. One day, he received a handwritten letter from a young man who had read about his story. The letter read, in part, "Your courage gave me the strength to stand up to someone who belittled me because of my background. Thank you for showing me that dignity and kindness can triumph over hate." Reading the letter, James felt a profound sense of purpose. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been transformative, not just for him, but for everyone who had witnessed or been touched by the events. The Silver Oak Hotel, once a symbol of exclusivity, became a beacon of inclusivity. It hosted community events, welcomed guests from all walks of life, and stood as a testament to the power of accountability and change. Months after the incident, James Turner sat in the newly renovated lobby of the Silver Oak Hotel in Dallas, sipping a cup of coffee and reflecting on how much had changed. The once intimidating atmosphere now felt warm and welcoming, a testament to the transformation sparked by a single moment of injustice. Across the lobby, Sophia Morales was busy organizing a community event, her confidence shining as she coordinated with staff. She waved to James, who returned the gesture with a smile. Nearby, a young couple entered, pushing a stroller through the widened pathways, a subtle yet powerful symbol of the hotel's commitment to accessibility. James's journey had been a reminder of the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. Change doesn't happen overnight, he often told people, but it begins the moment you refuse to accept what's wrong. Ethan Morgan, now a frequent visitor to the Dallas location, joined James at his table. "This place feels different," Ethan said, his voice carrying the weight of pride and satisfaction. "And that's because of you." James shook his head humbly. "It's not just me. It's everyone who refused to stay silent. Sophia, the community, even you." The two men sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the bustle of the hotel. For Ethan, it was a reminder of the power of using one's influence for good. For James, it was proof that dignity and resilience could inspire lasting change. As James prepared to leave, he passed a group of young veterans arriving for a mentorship program. One of them stopped to thank him, saying, "You've shown us all what real leadership looks like." James smiled, knowing the impact of his journey would ripple far beyond that moment, proof that justice and respect could triumph over prejudice.